Good morning, Nick, and hello, everybody. For all of you out there, my name is Albert Kehrer, and I'm on the board of PROUT at Work, and I'm honored to have Nick Mott today with me, who agreed to join me for this lunch talk. Most of the listeners might know that PROUT at Work has just launched its PROUT Performer project. And within the project, we are planning to publish lists of out executives, executive allies, as well as what we call it PROUT voices. Also part of this project is today's lunch talk, which will be the start of a series of chat with out senior LGBT people from around the world. Nick, who's with me in this call, has been at global law firm Dentons for many years, most recently as Assistant General Counsel. And between 2014 to 2019, he was also Diversity and Inclusion Partner in the UK, during which he significantly raised the visibility and importance of inclusion and diversity within the firm. He set up and continues to chair Dentons' global LGBT+ network, which connects Dentons' LGBT+ staff and their allies across its many regions and raises awareness in a variety of ways, including an annual Dentons Global Pride Day. During Nick's tenure as Diversity and Inclusion Partner, Dentons UK was listed at Stonewall Top 100 Employer for 4 years running. Dentons is also recognized as a Stonewall Top Global Employer 2020. Externally, Nick supports a number of LGBT+ charities, including diversity role models, and is a volunteer with Open Doors London as part of their telefriending services for older LGBT people. Nick retired from the partnership in 2020 and is now a senior global advisor to Dentons, advising on LGBT+ issues and awareness. And he was proud to be named in the 100 Outstanding LGBT+ Executives Role Model in 2018 and 2019. And some of you may have noticed Outstanding has just published its list, its 2021 list 2 days ago, I think. Nick, a very warm welcome and thanks for taking time to have a chat with me.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Excellent. For the audience, if you come up with questions, please do not hesitate to ask them to us via the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app, and we will certainly try to answer them at the end of this session. So let's start, Nick. Why is the topic LGBTIQ or LGBT+, what do you call it, so important to you?
Thank you. Well, I suppose for a start, as a gay man, it has a sort of an immediate importance in one sense. But of course, just because you're LGBT+, it doesn't mean that you need to take or you'd have necessarily a detailed interest in everything that's going on in the LGBT space. You've mentioned my background as a partner in a law firm, and obviously for many years that was a really time-consuming role in itself, and so I tended to concentrate on that. And to be honest, I didn't really think too much about LGBT issues beyond what immediately affected me. But as you also mentioned, some 7 years ago, I became our Inclusion and Diversity Partner, which is a sort of honorary role. You're there to promote inclusion and diversity generally. And I think when I took that on, I thought this would be about gender equality and some of the other areas and so on. And I didn't really think too much about LGBT at that particular point. But as I sat there and thought, how does the firm look? And as you mentioned, I've been at the firm for quite some years. And although I knew that the firm was pretty LGBT inclusive because I've been there for so long, I realized we had a real lack of visibility in the firm, a real lack of LGBT colleagues. And it made me think, if I was new joining the firm, how would I know that it was okay to be out, that that the firm was pretty LGBT friendly and so on. And so that's what made me start thinking much more about LGBT and the issues that we have today, and what drove me to co-found our UK network, which we call GLOW, and then our global LGBT network as well. Because I think the more you look at the topic, the more you think of the different strands there are, particularly the underrepresented ones, such as bisexuality, why are lesbians not so, you don't see, there's have much less visibility of lesbians, for example, compared with gay men. And then there's the whole topic of transgender people and the way they're treated and less understood, shall we say. So all of these areas became of real interest to me, and the more one looks into it and you think about it, the more interested I became in it. So in short, I think my interest was sort of sprung from a wider interest and desire for there to be greater equality for people with underrepresented characteristics, but then particularly thinking about my own and others within that LGBT plus strand.
When did you actually come out? Much longer, when you started with all your D&I engagement? Well,
yeah, that's a really good question. It was a gradual process over quite a long time. As you've mentioned, I've been at the firm over 30 years, and then I really wasn't out to many people at all, let alone wanting to be out at work, and that was partly about being comfortable about myself and so on. Our office even at that stage had a number of gay partners, and later on a managing partner who was openly gay. Well, that was a few years later. But people didn't shout it from the rooftops, but they didn't perhaps make a secret of it either. But for me, I think it was that much though I could see that there were other people who were gay in the office, I didn't know how I was going to be treated by those people who were immediately around me and how they would react. And there was no sort of way of telling, because nobody spoke about it positively. I didn't hear much negativity about it either, it's true. But if you didn't hear the positivity either, then it's difficult to know whether it's okay. And I think the other thing was, I didn't particularly want to be labelled as being, the gay person or the gay one, in the department or whatever. I mean, little did I know that actually, there were quite a few other people, which I only sort of discovered later on, who were, gay themselves, but was just. The subject didn't particularly come up because it wasn't, what you've kind of discussed at work, certainly not in those days, not that much at any rate. And so it's just easier to say nothing. And of course, the longer you leave things, the harder that becomes, because then it becomes how do I make an announcement? And, do I have to have a trumpet sound, and hey, I'm gay and all that kind of stuff. So, and also because you then think, well, to those colleagues that you're close to, they might think, well, why didn't he tell us before, and all that kind of stuff. So again, it's easy just to say nothing. And I actually came out for the first time in a really strange way when there was a really good colleague I had, a female partner at the firm, who we'd socialize together, go out for meals and so on, and we'd also discuss, what you did on holiday and that sort of thing, but never who you went with. And one time we went out for a meal, and she told me that she was in a relationship with another female colleague, and I was truly surprised at this, because there must have been something wrong with my gaydar, I guess. But there were, in fairness to myself, there were a number of reasons why I was sort of thrown off the scent, because of things she'd said in the past, or things that I had assumed, which of course is the worst thing you should do. But I had assumed when I'd seen her with other people that I thought maybe they were her other, her heterosexual other halves or whatever. So anyway, the point was that enabled me to be out to her, and that was just such an amazingly liberating experience to be, to be out and to be able to discuss all sorts of things with someone that, you know, with whom I had a really good relationship with anyway, but just not in talking about those things in the past. And that then led me to gradually to be out with other people in the office, but, you know, in a rather small way. And you know, I think the people I found most difficult to be out to were the people that I had the sort of the deeper work relationships with, because I didn't want, you know, because I valued their friendship on the one hand and didn't want to lose that, not because I thought they would be hostile to me being gay, but because they would think, well, you know, why did he say this before? What else is he hiding? All those sort of things. But you kind of internalize and overthink a lot of the time. And of course, you know, the truth is that most of the time it's absolutely fine, as indeed it was. So, and I wasn't out, I suppose, more generally at the firm, as in sort of, you know, I don't know who knew and who didn't, because, you know, again, it wasn't sort of shouted from the rooftops. But obviously, once I started setting up the LGBT network and do more on the equality side, well, people would kind of gather. So I kind of outed myself more generally at that point. So it's been a very, very gradual process. And I suppose the moral from my story is don't do what I did. I mean, you know, it was different circumstances, and I think the truth is, if I'd moved jobs fairly regularly and so on, I'd have at some point started from day one and been open about things, and then it's much easier to do so. But because I hadn't, I made a mountain for myself to climb. It was all in my mind largely, I think. So the short answer to your question is over a period of years.
I was certainly different, and yeah, much more difficult times. The legal situation was different to what we have now in the UK or in Germany. And therefore it was much more difficult to come out. I already said that you were ranked 24th on the outstanding top 100 list in 2019.
Yes, I'm not in this year's one because I retired last year. So, well, that's what I'm telling myself anyway. I didn't put a submission in for it.
And you needed to make space for all the other out executives
exactly,
to get on the list. That's true, yeah. And I guess this did the last bit to make you completely be out at work to be on such a list. How were the responses in your network to be on the?
Sorry, I think it was the response was really good. I think that you know, the people in my own network were very supportive, and I think, you know, they were pleased about it, and in effect it was a recognition for a sort of a joint effort, because, you know, whilst you make the submission yourself, a lot of it is about what you do collectively with other people. And so you know, it was good. I think it was sort of seen as a bit of a, you know, an award, as it should be for everybody, so they could all take some, you know, all take credit for it. And you know, there were some nice comments on LinkedIn and so on. I think what was also more pleasing in many ways was the reaction from sort of other colleagues outside the LGBT network, colleagues in the wider firm. You know, we had an announcement kind of internally in our weekly newsletter, and I had some really nice emails from people that I wouldn't perhaps have expected to hear from. And, you know, quite a few people stopped me. This was in the days when we were actually in the office. Quite a few people would stop me in the corridor and say, well done, and so on. And, you know, sometimes I wonder what they were talking about, and then I realized. And I think, you know, given that we're quite a large firm and there's all sorts of announcements going out all the time, so, you know, first of all, somebody has to notice that this has gone in there. They have to remember it, and then they have to remember it, you know, when they see you. So I was quite sort of pleased to get that. So I think it was more the reaction from the non-usual suspects, if I can put it like that, that was the pleasing thing. And you know, of course, management were always like to have something good said about the firm. So you know, it was good from their perspective too.
Any responses, comments from clients?
I can't specific. Well, no, I can think of some nice comments from some clients actually, and you know, this brings out the whole thing about whether you're out to clients or not, and To some clients I was, but you know, it's only those where you have some sort of social setting, and you know, you get the opportunity to mention that. So yes, I did receive some nice comments from clients just saying, you know, really pleased to see that or whatever. So yeah, and that was nice to have as well, because again, you know, the other issue over the years of is whether you know, what effect. It's one thing if you're out to your colleagues and so on, and the effect that might have. Another thing if you're out to clients and you worry to some extent what effect that would have. And I have to say, my experience has always been with clients that if you shared something like that with them, they were actually very pleased and felt quite sort of slightly honoured, if you like, that you felt able to share that with them. So you know, that was I never had any bad responses from clients at all, and you know, in relation to this, you know, some positive comments.
Excellent. Why do you think it is important that, you know, lists like the outstanding list or our list exist?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. I think, you know, first of all, it shows the strength and depth of the LGBT community within different sectors, within different businesses. And, you know, I'm constantly impressed myself about this, because, you know, sometimes I sort of still wake up and wonder if I'm the only gay in the village, you know, and have to be sort of slightly sort of self-reassured that I'm not. And so when you see something like this, a fantastic list of different people in all different walks of life, I think, you know, it gives you a sense of community. But I think it's also important for the organizations for which we work, professional organizations and so on, to see this, because, you know, it hopefully brings home to them that there's all this talent there. There's this huge talent within the LGBT community, and you know, hopefully it makes them think, reflect on what they would miss if they weren't LGBT inclusive themselves. Because after all, you know, all the people on these lists have got, you know, they've got a choice of where they work, and you know, if they felt they were unhappy, presumably, in where they were, then in terms of the LGBT element of things, then, you know, they would perhaps go elsewhere. So so I hope it has a sort of dual role of giving a sense of community to those who are LGBT, but also you know, making a good impression, a positive impression on people who are not on the organisations that we're all connected with. So I think it's you know, when I look at that list, I think it's a comforting and reassuring to know that we're you know, we're a significant cohort, and that there's a strength in numbers, and it sends out a good public message.
Okay, excellent. A question we asked our followers on social media a few weeks ago was, what do you think makes a role model? Do you have any role models personally in your private or your professional life?
Yes, I had to think about this one. But I think in terms of role models generally, I'll just say a few words about role models in general, because we talk a lot about this within our network and so on. One of the things that we try and do is promote role models and so on, and we sort of think about what role models are. And I think, you know, it's someone you admire, it's someone you can identify with, who's perhaps sort of shown the way on something that you want to pursue. It's you know, it's someone you can think, well they did that, so perhaps I can do that too. And when someone has led the way, it of course makes it easier for others to see how they could do something with their own lives, or just because that person has done something, it might make you think, well, you know, I don't have to be the first person to do that. I don't have to be the first person to come out at work. I don't have to be the first person to, you know, be gay and be CEO or whatever it might be, because someone else has already done that. And I think what often happens is that role models are everywhere, but people in the individuals don't always recognise that they are one themselves, because they may think that they've not done anything special themselves. They may think that in order to be a role model, you have to be a sort of paragon of virtue. You have to have done everything perfectly, and the reality is that you don't. I mean, just doing something, even if you've made mistakes along the way and so on, because that can be a role model in its own right. People can learn from those mistakes. So I think sometimes it's about recognizing what a role model is, and then sort of persuading people themselves that they can be a role model themselves. And I think the importance of it all is all about, for me, it's all about normalization of being LGBT. You know, it's allowing people to bring their whole selves to work. So, I mean, for many years when it wasn't really talked much about at work, you know, people tended not to be out, or not to many people, and so not that many people would know someone who was LGBT. And so when someone was outed, particularly if they were, you know, in the public eye, in the media or whatever, it was, you know, it was big news, and there was perhaps a sense of shame, and you know, we know who you sleep with, sort of thing. And so, you know, to my mind, the more people who are out and therefore visible and are role models, if you like, the better it is, because the more unremarkable being LGBT is. And I think that's what LGBT role models can bring to an organization. They're sort of saying, you know, we're here, we're proud, and we got on, and so can you. So, you know, within the office, we try and persuade what we regard as role models, people, to be visible in a whole variety of different ways. That can be kind of like through posters, or it could be through, you know, presenting something, introducing something, maybe doing something very much within their own workspace, within their own, with their colleagues in their workspace. But, you know, if they're known for being LGBT as well, then it kind of just sends that positive subliminal message out there, to their work colleagues, but also to others who may be thinking, you know, who may be LGBT but are not actually out at the moment. You know, that it sends a really positive message. I think in terms of, you know, whether I was inspired by anybody, I mentioned before there was an openly gay managing partner back in the for our firm back in the 1990s, and although, you know, as I said before, he didn't really sort of shout it from the rooftops, it was definitely known about. And I suppose that sent to me, although it didn't have the immediate effect of making me want to come out for the reason I described, I nevertheless, I think it sort of sent the message that, you know, this was an LGBT inclusive organization. And when I would hear positive things, as I did, said about him, you know, I didn't hear anyone say anything snide or any comments about him being LGBT, or, you know, he's gay, so what would you expect, or words to that effect. Nothing like that. It was, you know, it was, and that sent out a sort of a positive message.
Good. Have you been made aware of your positive influence to another person?
Well, when you always hope you've made a positive influence on people, and I think one of the things you've mentioned that we do at Dentons is to do an annual Global Pride Day, and so quite often this brings you in contact with quite a lot of people across different regions. And you get some really nice messages and feedback from that. And this in May last year when we have it, of course we had to go completely virtual, and we didn't know quite what to do. So in the end we got people to send photographs of themselves in lockdown, as it were, with a positive message about why they thought the importance of being allies. We had a whole theme around that, and they could hold different messages up, and some were longer than others. But we had this, and I didn't really know quite how this was going to go, because I thought, oh, it might not work out very well. But actually, we got lots and lots of submissions, and some really nice, among the actual sort of the positive messages we got on the photos. We also got some nice things alongside that, saying, I'm so glad you're doing this. And then people sort of adding their personal, why they personally were an ally themselves, or, you know, or whether, you know, if they were LGBT, then, you know, why it was important to them. And so that was very interesting to get. And I mean, from time to time we get messages from people, you know, sometimes in countries where you wouldn't, you know, where you think it's very relaxed and people wouldn't worry about being out. But, you know, I've had messages from people saying, you know, we've been at some other firm and you know, I didn't feel as though I could be out there, but you know, I'm so pleased to come here and see this visibility and so on, and this is really means I can be myself. So I've seen that. I've had comments from other people who've said, you know, I'm very close to someone who's gay, and I saw what problems they had when they were young and coming out and so on, and it's good to be part of an organisation like that. So those sort of comments I've certainly received, and I think that's nice to have. And one other comment, we did a little video a couple of years ago about what it was like to be out at work or not to be out at work, and this drew on things about, you know, bumping into one's colleagues outside work when you have your same-sex partner with you, for example, and so on, and you know, whether you have a conversation or whether it's all terribly embarrassing and so on. And it was interesting that the colleagues that I immediately worked with, who of course, you know about me and so on, so, well, that's really interesting, you know, that really brought home to us what it's like. We never really thought about it before, because we thought, well, we're in the UK and it's fairly relaxed here, etc., etc. So they never really, it was putting themselves in you know, what it might be like to be LGBT.
Excellent. As you know, and I told you several times, PROUT will publish the German equivalent, I would say, to Outstanding List this summer. And in Germany, quite a lot of LGBT executives are reluctant to get on such a list. Do you have any encouraging words for viewers on why they should nominate others for this list, or in case they are nominated themselves, why they should accept the nomination?
Yeah, I do. I think it's very exciting that you've got the list coming up, and I would certainly encourage everybody to think about either nominating someone or being nominated themselves. I mean, as I mentioned, I think a lot of the whole thing about the visibility side and so on is really the normalization of you know, being LGBT and so on, and the more people who are out in public life or in private life and so on, the more people that will know somebody who's LGBT and then think it's nothing remarkable, which indeed, you know, it shouldn't be. And so, you know, visibility is very much fundamental to that, and that's where, you know, lists and so on can play a real role, it seems to me. So I think it's important that people can see you both, you know, out in the office and you know, and outside as well. And I mean, I personally, you know, sometimes I feel a bit of slightly fraudulent in saying this, because, you know, I haven't always been out, as I've said, but I'm a real convert to this in the last, you know, since I've been doing the diversity role and so on, last 7 or 8 years. I'm a real convert to seeing what a huge difference this can make. And I'm a pretty private person myself, so, you know, that's another reason I think why I stay sort of buttoned up, if you like, for a long time. As I said, you know, I just got on with my day job, as it were, and you know, if you told me some years ago that I'd be on this sort of call talking about my sexuality, let alone have received some sort of public, you know, award or recognition, then I'd have said you were mad, because, you know, I am by and large a pretty private person. So I can fully understand why people would think, well, you know, why would I want to do this? Why is it important? But I think, you know, part of it is when you get to a certain part of your role in life and so on, maybe part of it is about sort of speaking out for your community, standing up and being counted, and helping to be part of that greater movement which normalizes being LGBT, so it's not remarkable. And so we perhaps don't need to have awards in due course. That would be a sort of a nirvana eventually. And you know, it's about sort of just being allowed to, for people in the office to kind of talk about their same-sex partners in the same sort of casualness, if you like, which heterosexual people talk about them. So I understand that, you know, in Germany, as was the case in the UK until comparatively recently, it's perhaps, you know, not the sort of thing that people talk about so much in the office and so on. But I do think there's an element of sort of standing up and being counted, and hopefully making it better for others, because, you know, if you've got to a certain level yourself, You know, there are plenty of more junior people in the office who maybe they were out at university. Stonewall's constantly telling us that our people are out at university and they go back in the closet when they start work, when they join a professional organisation, whatever, because they don't know if they don't know what, you know, how that organisation will treat them, how they will be regarded, whether it will affect their careers. And so I think it's important that people should be visible, and one way of being visible is by being in such an award. And as I said before, I think, you know, it also helps to validate what you've done, because the firm can see that, you know, it's not something that's come from internally. This is someone external saying, this person that's working in your firm, your organization, thinks this, you know, look at what this person has done. They're really validating what this person has done, and you should value them too. So I think there's so many positives about being in awards, and also, you know, it provides the individuals themselves with a degree of networking, puts them in touch with other people who are on that list, to some to a greater or lesser extent, of course. But, you know, I think that's you know, so there are sort of, you know, it's not just for the, you know, for the public good. It does the individual good as well. And you know, I've never heard anyone who've been on these lists sort of say it's done them anything other than good, and been really a positive experience. So I would encourage people to positively consider being nominated.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm at the end of my long list of questions. That was really well timed, I would say. But we have already 2 questions in the chat. And if anyone else wants to send a question, send it in the Q&A function in Zoom. I'll start with the question from Hannah. And she's asking, have you had the feeling that some of your relationships with your clients changed even slightly after your coming out?
No, I don't think. Well, not adversely. At any rate, as I mentioned, a couple of people, you know, that I shared this with were really positive about. I mean, you know, actually we spoke about it and said, oh, you know, thank you for sharing that. We know we appreciate that. Might not have been an easy thing to say or to tell us about, and we really value you telling us that. And I think in one particular case, it actually sort of strengthened the relationship, because, you know, you'd shared a confidence with them, as it were, that sort of helped strengthen the business relationship in that way. So obviously, you know, you don't know what people say after, you know, they say one thing to your face and something else afterwards. But I never, I suppose your real worry is, you know, you're going to lose a client or something, you know, because they'll be somehow anti-gay or anti-LGBT. But, you know, I personally never experienced that. And it's interesting, we had a roundtable discussion on this with colleagues, with friends at one of the big accountancy firms a few years ago, and we had this sort of very much big discussion on the whole topic. And there it was very, again, the feedback that came out from that was very positive, that people were perhaps a bit reticent about being out with their clients, and obviously it's not something you want to rush out and start talking about. But I think, you know, you can, if people start talking, if you go out for, you know, social interaction with your client and so on, and they talk about their family situation, well, would they think twice about mentioning, you know, their other sex spouse or whatever? So why shouldn't you casually mention your same-sex spouse or partner? So, you know, I think if it's done in the right way, then I don't see that it should be a negative problem to it.
Excellent, thank you very much. And one question from Joe: have we been approached or supported yourself LGBT plus individuals as a mentor or sponsor in their careers? And if yes, in which way?
Yes, is the short answer. We ran a mentoring program at the firm a while back, and this was for obviously people more junior, lawyers and so on, and others. Excuse me. And so I was part of that program. But I think there is also an element of doing that in a less systematized way, because I think you are often, when you form work relationships and so on, and particularly through the network, most people are sadly these days are younger than I am, and therefore you can play a bit of a role in helping them think about their lives and what they do, and well, nobody has to, or nobody that I've met had to think about whether they were out, because they were already out anyway. But I think you can play a mentoring role in terms of getting them to think about what they want to do in life. And professional life is changing so much at the moment, and the pandemic has just shown us a different way of working as well, and brought forward all sorts of things to do with that. So I think you can certainly do that. But I think, within the context of the LGBT side of things, you could say, well, anyone can get that mentoring, and indeed they can. But I think sometimes people like to have someone who they feel kind of understands where they're coming from in terms of their background, the things they don't have to explain, those sort of things that are just understood. So yes, is the short answer to the question.
Excellent. One more question just came in. Do you have an advice for D&I professionals in law firms or any firm on approaching the topic of LGBT plus inclusion?
Sorry, was it, do I have any advice in relation to that?
Advice. Yeah, okay. An advice for D&I professionals in law firms. It actually comes from a person from a law firm on approaching the topic of LGBT. Yeah,
I think first of all, it's about sort of trying to think what's the culture in your firm. You know your firm best in many ways. So it's trying to think about what would work. I mean, we for a long time, and for too long, frankly, I sat with the only other gay person that I was confident was actually gay in the office for a long time, worrying about how we were going to launch the network group. Do we hold a meeting? Do we have it in the office? Do we have it outside? What if we're the only ones, and everybody wanders past to see who else is there? And are they going to, are people going to worry about outing themselves and all that kind of stuff? And we worried about this for far too long. And in the end, we just sort of took the plunge, and it was really successful. And it wasn't about it was about getting people to come and understand a bit about being LGBT. So I think, if you're worried about people thinking they have to out themselves, then do it in a way that suggests that everyone's allies. So they're not having to out themselves. They just come because they're interested in the subject and so on. And the truth is, there are a lot of people who are non-LGBT who are very supportive, and some of our strongest people within the network are the non-LGBT people. So it is true that there's a good allyship response there, but I think it's also really important is to get the buy-in from management, from senior management. Get them to, what we did when we launched things was to have our managing partner come and speak at we had a lunchtime session. We just said it was just to talk about things generally and so on. We had him come and speak, because that sends the message from the top that it's important to the firm, and that it's not some sort of hidden away, rather shameful or whatever thing in a sort of dark basement room, but actually it's in one of our main meeting rooms. The management thinks this is important, and it sends out all the right sort of messages. So I think working out what's good, right for your for the culture of your firm is one thing, but also getting management to support it, because if management people, there's no two ways about it, if management and team leaders you know, think something's important, and they tell their colleagues, or you know, more junior people, the people that report to them about it, then that sends a very positive message, and other people start thinking, oh, you know, maybe that's important to me, or maybe I should take notice of this.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. And thank you very much to everybody who asked that question. We are nearly at the end of our time. Now, all out there, you heard definitely why we need LGBTIQ role models. And if you are one, or if you are aware of one, do not hesitate to nominate them on our website, proudperformer.proudatwork.de. We will be very happy to see loads of them on our list. And the list will be published beginning of June, as I'm aware, yeah. And nomination starts today, or I think started yesterday. Nick, thank you very much for your time. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was even more enjoyable than our last call. Thanks for your time, and definitely for your insight. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Very, very happy to have done it, and very, very pleased to have been here.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.